Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. Thank you. We are going to start our official side event where we're going to discuss issues that are important to consider when you are doing climate action in order to be context specific, in order to make sure that you are addressing the social differentiations that exist in our society for social inclusion. Those are the issues that we're going to discuss as we are transitioning into a low carbon society. Thank you. My name is Margaret Angula. I'm a senior lecturer from the University of Namibia. I'm going to chair this session. I would start first of all, I would like to introduce our keynote speaker. The session is structured in such a way that we're gonna start with our keynote speaker, and then she'll be followed by our panelists who are going to share a lot of experiences from the field, and then we'll have a commentator at the end. I would like to introduce Ms. Aina Maria Iteta, who is an executive for business strategy and performance at the Environmental Investment Fund of Namibia. The Environmental Investment Fund is accredited for GCF funding in Namibia. She is also the UNFCCC focal point for gender and climate change for Namibia. And I should add that she is also an advocate, as she has been really driving dialogues on this topic of gender and climate change in Namibia, and in particular advocating for intersectionality, going beyond gender, social differentiation, and social inclusion. Ms. Aina Iteta, the floor is yours, just to share some key points on what are the Namibian lessons regarding gender and climate change adaptation and mitigation actions, and what are the lessons that we have learned with regard to social inclusion, as Namibia is known as a country with few people, but with many, many ethnic groups that are highly differentiated.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator, for that introduction. Just to set the tone of my introduction, and just before I share the experience from our national perspective, just to recognize at global level as Article 7 of the Paris Agreement, as well as SDG 5 on gender equality agenda for 2030, as well as the UNFCCC Enhanced Rima Work Plan, which from a gender focal point of view really play a major role, that this sets a higher level commitment towards the integrating gender and social inclusion into our climate change solution. So the other time I was just listening and participating in the GST, and one of the key issues I pick up that we are highlighting that at this juncture, our participation of women in the past 10 years have actually just increased with 5%, from 30% to 35% in terms of women participation. It's not really something we would say we have to celebrate with that extent, but a call of concern, however, acknowledging that there is that slight movement and in terms of mainstreaming and looking at the empowering and participation of women into negotiations of this magnitude. So the inequality poses a formidable obstacle to effective climate change, as it not only amplifies susceptibility to the repercussions of climate change, but also hinders engagement in the process of mitigation and adaptation that we are trying to achieve. So hence, prioritizing social inclusion and gender equity is very essential in addressing climate challenges and definitely by actively involving local communities whose insights and voices might be otherwise overlooked, we can pave the way for more effective strategies to build resilient and expedite our climate change action. So social inclusion ensures that diverse voices are heard, and most with a focus to vulnerable communities, and definitely considering that the impact of climate change are distributed just and fairly. And of course, we would try to zoom in when it comes to which vulnerable groups are we exactly looking at in this context. So this pervasive imbalance in the distribution of resources, opportunities, and decision-making power exacerbates the vulnerability of these identified vulnerable communities, individuals, preventing them from actively participating in the necessary initiation to address the climate change challenges. So hence, addressing climate change effectively will require this inclusive and equitable approach that acknowledge and rectify the existence of these disparities as well as the injustice to this focused vulnerable group. So by dismantling these barriers to participation and ensuring that vulnerable communities have a voice in decision-making processes, we can create a more robust, sustainable climate actions and strategies in our focused intervention. So now looking at Namibia and just focusing in terms of the segment of the populations that we see perceived as mostly vulnerable in this situation. First and foremost, we are looking at indigenous and local communities. Definitely, the indigenous and rural communities often face heightened risks due to their dependence on climate change, the resilience on natural resources, and susceptibility to extreme weather because of their position in the society, especially from a social inclusion point of view, which is yet to be emphasized and be empowered from that context. And secondly, we also definitely have to look at women in general. Of course, it's very, very critical that we have to cluster and be intentional in terms of classifying these groups of vulnerable people. As much as indigenous women could be women, but we need to look at them with a different lens towards their vulnerability as well as their resilience. So however, generally, women are disproportionately affected by climate change due to societal roles that they play in our economy in terms of their vulnerability to access resources, as well as issues of right and just inclusion, especially when it comes to land access, financial capitals, and other issues. So without leaving the other segment of the youth group and children, very interestingly, just because of the dynamic position where they are placed in the society, but carefully if one have to consider women and children equally, their burdens of climate change are equally inherited mostly by their mother. So that actually make it double a burden to women in terms of dealing with issues of adaptation, resilience in the society. So from Namibia perspective in terms of intervention, definitely our government have really a strong political will towards supporting gender mainstreaming across the board. So at country level, Namibia has made enormous strides in the gender space, duly recognized by its 2017 accolade African Excellent Gender Award for its effort in implementing the national gender policy and initiatives towards promoting gender equality and the empowerment of women at large. The Namibian government have programs that empower women through education opportunity, economic opportunities, and recognizing the intersectionality of gender and climate impact. So the focus on women's leadership, climate resilient livelihood, and social inclusion, which is driven mostly at local level. the Namibian government has implemented a number of policy initiatives supporting sustainable agriculture, climate-smart agriculture, which is mostly endured and actually participated by women in our local society, providing early warning system and promoting alternative livelihoods to reduce dependence on climate-sensitive sectors, value addition to natural resources in terms of as an adaptive mechanism, and forming part of the strongest conservation effort in Namibia. Namibia is known as one of the countries with a very strong conservation biodiversity in terms of dealing with our natural resources, using it in a value chain, especially focusing on women who are collecting practically these natural resources to diversify their livelihood given the impact of climate change, as the agricultural sector is not doing well as such. In that midst, of course, we have a strong non-governmental organization and community-based organization support that are mostly engaged in capacity building, sustainable agricultural project support, and advocacy for the right of indigenous people, creating international linkages, especially for the commodities that are actually being either harvested directly from our natural resources, ensuring that there is a sustainability in terms of the availability of those products. So there is a strong harmonization of project resources from multilateral funding allocated to gender activities to address gender and climate change initiatives in Namibia. Of course, having also a group of multilateral financiers who are working together with the local players to create opportunities for these women. So strategies that we have really used and with that we thought have driven the position of seeing some significant contribution in terms of empowering women includes community engagement and participation. Our solutions are mostly locally driven and ensuring that we include the grassroots level in terms of finding solutions, preparing project proposal, and whatever financial facilities that we would propose to include them. Capacity building, very, very important, especially for our local people. Gender equality and social equity. So in terms of addressing and recognizing the gender disparities in vulnerability, so we consider unique needs for different social groups, such as the indigenous community, the ethnic minorities in our society who at some point, if grouped within the entire society, might be lost in transition. Hence, we try to come up with adaptation plans and solutions that are tailor-made to their need. So we have also tried to work in terms of accessibility to information. Information is the power. And of course, working with non-governmental organizations, community-based organizations, we drive the process with the local government to make sure that these people get the information that would be a powerful mechanism to ensure that they access funding opportunities, they access training opportunities, and they are part of the equation. Issues of legal protection and land rights, we have made good progress where many a time our women, probably 20, 30 years ago, they would have challenges when it comes to land access. At this juncture for Namibia, we can really celebrate some milestones where women, widows are not experiencing and they have opportunities to contest. Shall that happen in terms of being pushed away from their land that they have been living in as a livelihood in their constituency. So all in all, we have learned that proper coordination of gender mainstreaming activities at national level can make a difference as the little allocated resources, strategies, once combined, can make a meaningful difference between the national level, local level, as well as our grassroots communities, and that create an inclusive social agenda that can address the challenges of the country. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Ayman, for those beautiful remarks that represents views from Namibia. And now, without wasting further time, we're going to move now to our panelists, where we are going to hear from their lessons. We say those who understand women issues are those who are working directly with our communities, either as a practitioner or researchers. So our panelists hail from Latin America, South Asia, and Sub-Saharan Africa, and they are all part of what we call GROW program, Gender Equality in a Low Carbon World. So I am going to ask you just to answer this question in your remarks. What is the evidence and recommendations that you have for us, or what are the implications, how to support marginalized women, other marginalized groups, the most vulnerable groups to climate change in our society, for their empowerment and their enhanced benefit from climate resilient development. So give us some recommendation. Thank you. I am going to start with Kashan Lama. Kashan Lama is a principal investigator on one of the GROW projects, and this project is looking at economic empowerment of women through forest solutions. What they are looking at in this project, they are actually trying to increase women's equitable access to and control over forest resources through income generation, livelihood diversification, value chain, etc., while at the same time creating enabling policy and institutional environment for transitioning to low carbon society.
Good afternoon. I'm Kanchan Lama, as you mentioned very well. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to share some experiences from Nepal. Actually, this GROW, we all work under the GROW approach. And in Nepal, actually, we work with this project particularly. We are working with forest-based people. That means those who rely on the forest resources for their livelihood and well-being. Those people, of course, do not have land. Even if they have land, that will be very small holding. So they have to rely on forest resources. By working with them in this project, which is a 30 months action research project, it is funded by International Development Research Center, Canada, and implemented by a consortium of Forest Action Nepal, Himalayan Grassroots Women's Natural Resource Management Association, Association of Family Forest Owners, and Federation of Forest-Based Industry and Trade. As you see, the characteristic of the partners are all very right-based partners, and along with one private partner. So in this project, actually, we try to learn exactly as you said, what are the barriers, structural barriers the women have to go. They keep going, but not only by us, but facilitating an environment where women mapped and they found how climate change has impacted on women differently than men. Women mostly faced, among others, the most difficult problem they faced is food insecurity, which really helped have impact on their bad health, ill health, and even pregnant women and children get anemic. And the men also, tend to go to migration, because there is lack of employment. In this, at this moment, there are, the very increasing trend of male migration to Nepal, and to stop those or to, accelerate some of the community mobilization to adapt to this kind of situation. In this project was a kind of, some regulations for employment creation and some supply of technologies that can help labor saving and time saving for the women group, and some good long-term production, and where some some efforts were made for water resource restoration and improved species, alternate livelihoods. These are some other CSOs also doing. Check. Then we call it green enterprises and green entrepreneurs. Actually, when we work with forest-based forest-based activities, it is always naturally green, and also we wanted to retain its green. They don't need any chemical fertilizer, no any outside support. Support is there, but like government services, private services like that. But the awareness was done mostly on sustainable forest management, and also little on carbon measuring training. And through awareness, what was done, like their to retain their own cultural and indigenous identity, to learn from their indigenous practices, which would be most appropriate to adapt to the adaptation of climate change, and at the same time building economic resilience through green enterprises from forest resources. They have produced various items for long, but at the same time, with the modern privatization, they feel sometimes, very neglected. That, oh, why should we keep on bamboo weaving only? But the later on, when they identified their own capacity and their knowledge and their strength within them, they started saying the hands that weave bamboo can transform climate context. So with this kind of trust and respect, self-respect, the project went on, and to that building on political and social empowerment of the through agency building exercises, and framing a new identity of green entrepreneurs. These days, the ladies will say we are green entrepreneurs and we do green enterprises. We adopted collaborative approaches with multi-stakeholders, government, private. We tried a lot with the private sectors. We were not very successful. Still, it is continuing. But local government came up with a very, positive attitude. At first, they were nervous if they were doing right. But later, when they found the women are really being capable of claiming their rights and voicing their issues, they also collaborated. And in the NDC of Nepal 2020, NDC 2020 also have some direction towards this. Multi-stakeholder collaboration is there. And now, recently, the two local government started doing women-led climate adaptation fund at the local government level. And the picture shows that recently, these green entrepreneurs, even at first they were nervous about whether they will be able to market or not, but they started learning and they also do the marketing. Now they are given very huge respect by the national Ministry of Industry, by inviting them to providing a stall free of cost to demonstrate and sell their products. Just recently, it is International Trade Fair. So the journey from zero to the International Trade Fair, the recognition they were able to, obtain for themselves as green entrepreneurs is very valuable. And it happened because we trusted on their knowledge, capacity, and then understood their needs and interest. It's not that we only the project people help, but it is more, it came more from themselves, the community themselves. So I think I don't want to go long. If you have more questions, then please ask me later. But I would like to add something, what we learned lesson this. I think once we do adaptation at the community level, women must be regarded as the primary users and primary actors of change and adaptation, actors of adaptation, leaders of adaptation, because they are more knowledgeable than others, as we found it from all the studies. And research methodology also should be redefined to articulate those areas where, where the barriers are there, but at the same time, aspirations are also there. So aspirations we counted, and we found some way to help them, to facilitate them to achieve their aspirations. And what we learned also that now with we are very glad that Namibia UNFCCC gender focal person is here today and very inspiring speeches. I think this should be also the motto and the, I think this should be also motto and also a role of the COP global leaders that count on women, grassroots women's knowledge, mostly indigenous and the Dalits and those who live on forest resources, also agroforestry. So without counting on their needs, interests, and their capacities, their aspirations, I think we might miss the strongest element of sustainability. So I appeal to all that we provide respect to the local knowledge, we count on their local capacities, and we learn from local environment. And with this, appeal again that this Women-led Climate Adaptation Fund, which is being started in Nepal in this project, I think could bring some good messages and we can scale it up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the remarks and evidence and experiences from Nepal. Now we're moving on to Senegal. Laure, she is a research director for IPAR Senegal, and she's going to share lessons from the project that is also empowering women through horticulture value chain in a post-COVID context in Guinea and Senegal. And the project is actually trying to provide evidence, and this evidence is used to enhance policy decision-making in a gendered responsive way. Laure?
Thank you. So what I want to share with you today is insights from ongoing research. So please, if you have things to share with me, I am willing to take up all your information. This is a research that is led by my institution, IPAR think tank. And IPAR is based in Senegal, but operating in all West Africa. Our focus is on agricultural policies and ensuring that smallholder farmers are not left behind in those policies. At IPAR, we believe in producing evidence to inform policy, facilitating dialogues that involve multiple stakeholders, and empowering stakeholders for active participation to those dialogues. That is how we started researching these crucial issues of gender equity, gender inclusion for a successful transition, energy transition in the agricultural sector. That has been said, in the agricultural sector, women bear the burden of climate change. And this is mainly because they lack access to land, they lack access to assets. And this is the same for the access to productive energy and renewable energy like solar. So we have been working specifically on looking at how to improve this access to solar energy for women farmers. Most of us, even people out of this COP28, like and see the economic and environmental benefit of using solar energy. In this context, the access for women can bring solutions for less intensive and difficult work in the agricultural world, but also reduce carbon emission compared to using fossil fuel energy. Our findings provide evidence on management, time management, cost, profitability, women's empowerment, including negotiation power, leadership within the community. And I will share just a couple of results. We found an increase in the income of farmers that are using solar energy in Senegal. The difference income is up to $1,300 US, which is quite significant compared to the average income in Senegal. And for women farmers, what it means is that their contribution to household income and decisions are likely to be more significant, so they are likely to be more empowered. We also have a better understanding of who these women are. Who are the women, adopting solar energy. And this can help support capacity building program, and this can also help understand how to make better policies. So the woman who is using solar power for agriculture is older. She is more educated. She has a higher income than other women, but still lower than other men. She has been farming her land for many years, so she's an experienced farmer. She usually gets credits not from bank, but from informal sources. And unfortunately for her, she works more than other women and more than men. So what can we do to promote this access to solar energy for women in West Africa? We need to promote access to agricultural land first, which is a major issue. We need to raise awareness among women about the benefit of using this solar energy. We need to encourage women to participate to community group, to create alliance for them to take more responsibility in this production value chain. And lastly, we need to facilitate their access to credit. And this has been the thing we've been working on mainly. How do we get more access to credit? We have many constraints. The two main ones are availability of the technology and access to credit. And for that, we have started really interesting dialogues. And we have, for example, in Senegal, the agency in charge of renewable energy partnering with German corporation, Green Climate Fund, and they've been attracting new finance to lower interest rate for small producers. Now we are pushing for them to have specific programs for women. And when we talk about solar energy and women, we had met wonderful women. We had seen success stories, and what these women are telling us is that solar energy is not made for every farmers. It is made especially for women. So to finish, I would say that we want to overcome challenges, improve access of women farmers to solar energy. And this program that is multi-stakeholders program, this idea of having multiple dialogues, forming alliance, I think is a good way to go. We need fundings for sure, but not any funding. We need funding that are adapted, targeted, and to make sure that we have both, we need to discuss within these multi-stakeholder alliances and partnership. Thank you.
Thank you, Laure, for those research evidence and some recommendation that you have put through. Without wasting time, I think I will reserve my comments towards the end in the interest of time. So I'm going to introduce Margarita Beneke de Sanfeliu. Sorry if I did not pronounce it correctly. She is going to give us lessons from she's from the organization called FUSADES, based in El Salvador. Her lessons are from El Salvador, Guatemala, and Nicaragua. And the project that she's sharing lessons from is also empowering women in the agricultural value chain for a low carbon transition in Central America?
Yes, thank you. Like she said, we're currently working in a project to empower women in agricultural value chains in Guatemala, El Salvador, and Nicaragua, which are 3 countries part of the Central American Dry Corridor, which is one of the most vulnerable areas of climate change in the world. We are looking into 2 crops, cocoa, which is part of our global markets, and tomato, which are more oriented to local consumption. In our project, what we want to see are more empowered women, more and more empowered women in agriculture, which in our countries is male-dominated, and who apply green practices and participate in higher value chains, which provide a higher income for them so they can increase their well-being. These are the last part of the sentence, increasing their well-being, because, like Laura said, women that participate work more hours. So that may decrease the well-being. So we need to take that into account too. Thank you for reminding me. Okay, we think that just transition can increase the participation of women in jobs that, on the one hand, are resilient to negative climate impact, but also provide better income. We're looking at it in this ILO framework from the point of view of the production process, one that is more environmentally friendly. For example, in cocoa, we're looking at promoting protected system, the production under a protection instead of open air, because open air makes heavy use of pesticides and fungicides, which have a lot of higher emissions. And also protective systems use more efficiency the water that's available. Also, for cocoa, the climate-smart cocoa, enhance the resilience in the face of climate change, which in our region is an increasing problem. But these characteristics of a green job from the process needs to intersect with what's called a decent job. And these green jobs intersecting with the concept of decent job that the FAO defines for agriculture as one that provides an adequate income, security, and stability in employment. These crops that we're looking are provide work the whole year instead of just a stationary income, and provide training and occupation, and should be safe occupational risk without discrimination, without any type of harassment. So when we started seeing from our results, because we did quantitative and qualitative research, we see that this combination of a green job with a decent job is what's giving us the idea of what areas we need to work on. But participating in these higher value chains, like cocoa and tomatoes for supermarkets, it's a challenge. It's a challenge for smallholder producers in general, for women in particular. Access to these higher value chains require meeting higher standards and also higher volumes. And we cannot tell this, okay, let's lower the requirement. No, we need to lift all smallholders, their capabilities, so they all can meet the level of demands. Obviously, in El Salvador, which is a very small country, Nicaragua, Guatemala, we cannot say, have these huge volumes. You need more area, which sometimes is not possible, so let's work in associativity, in associations. And to increase the level of demands, well, we need training and knowledge, so we need resources for that. And sometimes that's a challenge. And these areas, it just illustrates what producers have the characteristic that would make them successful in that market. And the darker area represents those who are already there. So first we started to ask why the others that have the capacities are not doing it. So, and then we saw that in the darker area, the proportion of women are much less than in the others. So what can be happening? we see that there are many programs by the government, by the civil society, by international organizations like IPAR, they are working, and we talk to them, and they tell us, we have this program, but we don't get enough women. We don't, or the results we get are temporary. They go back, so we cannot increase more women in this thing. So why? That's the question we want to ask. Why? And we keep hearing women don't want to participate. Women won't want to do it. And we think that that's a misconception. And that's the results we're saying. Women can and want to do it. They're just facing many barriers. Okay. We hear that women don't want to do this type of job, or that they lose interest, that they train them, they go back, they start doing the things that they wanted to do, but finish, they drop out. For example, we talked to this large exporter of cocoa, and they have been working very successfully with a lot of associations, and they, to increase women's leadership, they put the requirement that they had to have the president of cooperative had to be a woman, president or vice president, but women just don't want to. That's what they say. And then when we start asking, they say, men harass us. Men just, there's all these, whatever, they don't feel good when they hear all the things that men tell them. So it's not that they want. We need to do. The other supermarket that has a large program to benefit tomato producers, say they wanted this project with 100 women, only 15 showed up. But what happened? Women don't want to do it. And then we started asking why. And we found that in these regions of El Salvador, which surprised me a lot because I didn't know this, they believed that when women is menstruating, they ruin the tomatoes. So they don't want to go to the tomatoes because they're going to ruin the tomatoes. So this is a bias. These are things that it's not that women don't want to do it. There are a lot of barriers. And also that they showed up for training, that they have training, that they show the first day, and they don't come back. But the thing is that women tell us that they could get their husbands to help with the children one day, but not for the whole period. So they drop out. It's not that they're not interested. There are barriers. And also they say they want to apply the things, but they're too expensive. And they're too expensive in two areas. The solutions proposed are not appropriate, or they don't have access to credit, or it's expensive in time, because women is time poor, and they have more. So this is a myth. Women don't want to do it. That's something myth. Well, that it got distorted. Well, this is the idea that there are three types of barriers simultaneously that women face at the same time. And it's stuck in the middle. That there are three areas. The first is structural barriers, which are things like access to credit and things that the requirements that the financial institution puts, like having a land title, and women don't have a land title, or structural, it's also a lack of a proper care system. It's a lack of proper system that's behind, but also bias and behaviors. And here in what we have told you in the graph before, part of the bias and behaviors are those of the person who's given the technical assistance, that they say that it's not because they don't want to, it's not appropriate, or the sexual harassment, other type of harassment they find in the marketplaces. And the ones on the right, the ones not showing, it's also internal barriers. That's barriers that are internally to women. That come up from the way women are socialized, which affect their self-confidence, their likelihood to apply for a loan, their negotiation skills, and to do self-promotion. So a lot of women we interviewed, which are producers, they don't see themselves as producers. Which says, how you describe yourself? I'm a housewife. But they are producers. They are the one producers. So it's internal barriers. So these three sets of barriers intersect and are present at the same time. The only thing is that each context may have different components. So it has to be very carefully understood and understand what are the barriers in this particular context. For example, the one of the tomato cannot apply to cocoa, but it's important to understand that there are three. Now, we see that these multiple and simultaneous barriers need to be addressed at the same time. Most of the programs we have been seeing address one or the other, but not a combination. That's why they fail to achieve the results they want. And this not failing to take into account these multiple barriers at the same time, it's a risk that we will be leaving women behind, more behind than they are if we don't do. And two, also we're wasting resources. They're scarce, and so they're not going to be as efficient. Now, in our project, we also have found excellent women who are very successful in what they do. So there are examples that they can and they want to participate. And they are also role models. A lot of them tell me, and they feel very proud, that other women, and especially men, now they say that they are capable. So this women leadership is critical. And it's critical not for representation, just to see that show other women that women can do it, but also because we need to talk to them, to listen to them, to find about what are the barriers, what needs to help, or what has helped them, and so we can help other vulnerable women. So, at the end, what we see is multiple and simultaneous barriers need to be addressed at the same time, so different stakeholders need to articulate. One actor, we believe, cannot do a complete job. So we need to think about, build these multi-stakeholder alliances. Laure was mentioned them. We have been paying attention to that too. And they have to be intentional, our colleague said, intentional, because good intentions are not good enough. We need to make sure that we carefully address the things. So we want recommendations, you said. I'm going to give you some. Especially to research organizations like ours, we need to pay attention to this, but also government, multilateral organization, international finance, everybody. One size does not fit all. Even if we say, okay, we have identified 3 types of barriers, they don't act in the same place, in every place or in every context at the same time. So we need to make an effort, invest an effort of understanding what the different systems are working against women in each particular context. And also, we need to, a lot of recommendations women are getting may not economic sense for them. They're too expensive to apply, and they don't get enough returns, so we need to understand that part too. And also, the private sector has a role. We have seen some successful examples in our region. But there's one point. There's a lot of lack of data of different participation and the barriers. And there's a lack of data. We have not found them in international forums and stuff, correlating women's empowerment, agriculture in a low carbon transition, and women and low carbon, the 3, gender, agriculture, and low carbon. And we need to invest in data, invest in research, invest in evidence. So just let me finish. Do not take, women do not want to do this for an answer when you hear this, because we can and we want to. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now I would like to invite Mairi Mairi Dupar, just to give some summarized points to the panel. She is actually coming from the Knowledge Transition Hub, the Knowledge Transition Hub for both CDKN and GROW. CDKN is Knowledge for Development, Climate and Development Knowledge Network, which is led by South-South-North based in South Africa. It is actually one of the co-hosts of this event. And Mairi Dupar, she provides knowledge services to CDKN and also to the GROW. And the GROW project is where most of our panelists are presenting from. So one of the things that Mairi did is to do a literature review. They have undertaken a literature review so that they could situate the GROW program within the landscape of evidence and policy narratives on women economic empowerment within the low carbon transitions. Mairi, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Margaret, for the introduction. As Margaret said, I'll do a little bit of summary of what we've heard and also pepper in some findings from CDKN's own literature review and some new research that we've done. So as we've discussed today, climate action must intentionally seek to empower women, and here's why. We know that climate hazards impact groups of people differently, according to their different vulnerabilities and capacities. That's very well known and documented. That's not news. But what is perhaps less acknowledged are the cascading or compounding impacts of climate hazards, which can have a gender dimension. And these can be discriminatory or outright harmful and dangerous. And here I'm referring to the studies that document increased gender-based violence and phenomena such as pulling girls out of school and forcing them into early marriages after extreme climate events which impact on economies at the community level. These types of cascading impacts are driving the gender development gap even wider, and climate change is magnifying gender inequalities. We know that accelerated adaptation actions are urgently needed, and mitigation action too, of course, urgently needed, particularly in high-emitting countries and segments of society. But nonetheless, we need to keep a laser focus on gender equity, social equity, and justice as we adapt and mitigate. Unless designed and delivered to intentionally empower women and marginalized groups, these climate action efforts could accidentally undermine their rights, their well-being, and their adaptive capacities. So mind the gender gap, please. So how do we do it? How do we advance climate action that empowers women, particularly marginalized groups of women? My program, CDKN, together with the Global Center on Adaptation, this year put out a call for stories for local adaptation champions, and we received more than 200 responses from around the Global South. And we worked with these local adaptation champions in depth with 19 of them to understand what resilience and adaptive capacity look like at community level and how these champions and their groups are pursuing these objectives. And they told us, we're taking a holistic approach to climate action, an all-of-person approach. Let me give you an example from a colleague, a community leader called Maxensia in Kampala, Uganda. She said, we're not just trying to clear away the solid waste like the plastic bottles, which are clogging up our waterways and making the flooding worse when those intense rains come. We're not just rolling out sack gardening and distributing seasonal vegetable seeds to the women so they can grow flood-resistant and drought-resistant vegetables to feed their families and generate income. We're also proving by doing this what women can achieve when they are economically empowered. And these achievements are raising women's self-confidence and their status in their households and their communities. And we're also, by the way, tending to each other's psychological or psychosocial needs in the face of climate-related losses and damages and these other kinds of social harms that we've talked about. So the initiatives in this book that CDKN and GCA have launched at COP28, the Stories of Resilience, Lessons from Local Adaptation Practice, are looking as much at mental health support and community dialogues for eradicating gender-based violence as they are looking at hydrology or tree planting as modes of adaptation. And we hear from these stories that local, particularly women-led groups, are seeing how all these things are connected. Oh, sorry. Most importantly, though, we're also hearing a clarion call for the defense of rights, which echoes through these stories. Local climate leaders, particularly women, are organizing to defend and promote their human rights, women's rights to access and use productive assets, including land and natural resources, which of course is a huge conversation that goes way beyond COP28, and their access to things like credit, which Laure mentioned earlier. They're organizing also to increase women's ability to organize in economic collectives for climate resilient, low carbon production, as well as to organize in social movements for their political solidarity. Because sometimes, of course, it requires policy change and budgetary allocations from governments and funders to realize these kinds of broader shifts in resilience and low carbon that they're seeking. Another thing is clear, and here I touch on the literature review which Margaret mentioned and which CDKN and GLOW put out earlier this year. And I'm very pleased to have my co-author Elizabeth Tan here in the audience with me as well. It's called From Consumers to Climate Leaders. We found really that for too long, climate and development literature and policy commitments, the majority of them, have focused on women as victims of climate change, or when it's talked about their agency, it's focused predominantly on their roles as consumers, for example, consuming fuel wood or other forms of energy or water in women's unpaid care work in the household. It's only recently that conversations about just transitions to decent, safe, low carbon and climate resilient paid work have emerged, although they've been dominated by voices unfortunately in the global south and male-dominated industries without adequate attention to women's needs. For this reason, it is fantastic news that the COP28 presidency and His Excellency Razan Khalifa Al Mubarak launched the COP28 Gender Responsive Just Transitions and Climate Action Partnership here in Dubai on the 4th of December, Gender Day. And it's particularly good news that this COP28 presidency initiative is looking at both emerging and already impacted job markets. Already 60 parties have endorsed the programme, and we hope very much that more will follow. Now, the COP28 initiative focuses on 3 core pillars: better quality data to support decision-making in green transition planning, more effective flows of finance to regions most impacted by climate change, and more education, skills and capacity building to support, and I quote, individuals to benefit from green transitions. Now, while these high-level objectives are very much to be welcomed, I would, from the perspective of CDKN's research and our women adaptation partners in our broader network, like to reiterate the importance of centering people's rights in this initiative and other green transitions. And it will be important that just transition actions, such as the COP presidency's initiative, focus on women's human rights, their rights to natural resource access and use, land, credit, and of course the security and the decency of work, which my colleagues here have spoken about. So looking at also labour rights and safety in the workplace. Also, some observations from the GLOW programme's research which could put more nuance on this just transition conversation. Sometimes the solutions for climate action that are empowering for women are in many ways hyper-local. You need to have that good national government policy in place, and you need to have means of implementation, particularly finance in place. It could include budget allocations to the local level, or perhaps even devolution of fiscal authority to local governments and involvement of the private sector for sustainability. Really, the devil is in the detail of the implementation. But I have to say that our research is finding sometimes local bylaws need to be enacted to support women's climate resilient economic activities. This is shown in the recent CDKN research volume, as well as in some of Kanchan's work in Nepal. And sometimes women need to negotiate among local actors for gender-just implementation of existing policies. So just because the policy is good on paper, of course, doesn't mean it's excellent and gender equitable in its implementation. And sometimes gains are precarious for women and easily reversed. And so we have some recommendations for how to lock in gains for gender equality in low-carbon transitions, climate-resilient transitions at the local level. And really, these recommendations are around the empowerment of women's groups and women-led initiatives, and also solidarity building among local groups of women from one to the other, and also, of course, as we've discussed here, in multi-stakeholder alliances with sympathetic and supportive external allies, including research partners and NGOs, to really sustain those gains. What is important is patient, predictable funding and partnership for women's and women-led groups working holistically, as I've said, on these issues at the local level. Now, a call to action for you. The GLOW programme has produced a call to action for gender-just, low-carbon economies. You can find it right there on our homepage. There's no www, just put in https://glowprogram.org, and you'll find this lovely artwork, and you'll find the call to action. And there we have a really long list of things that different stakeholder groups can do, from governments and multilateral agencies through to private sector entities, civil society organizations, women's and LGBTQI groups themselves, and research funders, all to elevate these agendas and move forward. So please check it out and sign up. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mairi. And I just want to emphasize that we do visit the call to action and do our part. I think we are a little bit behind with time. I would just like to introduce our commentator, and please do note your questions. We will have a brief question and answer session at the end. I would like to invite Santiago Alba. Santiago Alba is a director for climate resilience food system at IDRC, based in Canada. So he's got quite a history working within food system and agricultural system. And today he's just going to give us his reaction and some commentary notes based on the presentations that we have had for everyone who's sitting up here. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. And I presume that the last thing that you want to hear after this panel is a man talking about women farmers, European white man in my 50s. I'm sorry for that. And I want to share a story that I haven't shared before with you. And I want to share it because I think it's very relevant not only to the topic of today, but of who is inviting us today. More than 20 years ago, I was landing in Namibia as a young technical advisor of the Ministry of Land. And I met a woman. Her name is Napandula. Napandula, and my Oshibambo is really rusty, it's something like thank you, God, or thank you. But Napandula was a mother. Napandula was a widow. She was landless. She was a refugee coming from the Swapo camps in Angola. She was a farmer. She was the head of the committee of the communal garden. She was teaching on the kindergarten that we were developing in a resettlement project in between Ochibarongo and Ocho, in the middle of nowhere for somebody coming from northern Spain, a beautiful place. She was many things, and I think that's a key element when we talk about integrating elements of gender equality and women's empowerment. It's the intersectionality, it's the layers that we are as humans. And we forget that many times when we design projects, when we do research, when we decide interventions. We are not one thing. The beneficiaries, they are not one thing. There are many, multiple complex things. And that actually is what makes them so powerful. And that's why, in that case, Napandula opened my eyes to what that really means to be resilient. Over 2 years, I was working with her and with many others. I had the luxury of coming back 15 years later to the same place and actually found Napandula on Facebook, because that's the things that happen these days, that she had a Facebook page. And I asked her, she received, we had a coffee and how things are going, and she was on tears saying, my 2 kids are in university. That was not the success of a project, that I don't think was the best development project that I have worked in. That was the success of a woman that was making the best of what she has with probably the worst of the conditions. That is every example that we have here today in the research that we have. It's individuals that they are doing the best with the worst that they have in their hands. That is the power of bringing gender equality, women empowerment across the interventions that we do. That's why doing good research requires no gender-blind research. That's why the IDRC decided not to fund anything on our research agenda that will be gender-blind, because that's not good research, because that will not give us the good results. And we have seen today that the results and the impacts of all the research that we have seen in the panel is sustainable and is impactful, because it's looking at the complexity and the value of women when they bring, the value that women bring in the transformation. We are not going to solve the climate crisis if we don't solve the inequality crisis, because they are part of the same problem. Both crises came out for a system that is not responding to the planet, that is not responding to women. Those systems need to be changed, and the solutions came hand to hand. IDRC in the new 2030 agenda strategy actually defined that the major 2 challenges that we have in the next decade are climate crisis and the inequality crisis. Anything that we do has to look at those 2. So I want to actually congratulate everybody on the panel for the projects that you are doing, for the results that you are finding. I think it's very important that we hear about results of projects before they end. Knowledge happens before the project is finished. And I think this is part of the example that we have today. And I want to give you the time for conversations. Thank you so much, Margaret, for inviting us to be here with you today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, I am now going to invite anyone who has a question or a comment or an addition to the session that we had today. Anyone? Okay, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, so quite a lot. Okay, can we start with you, sir? Then let the mic move this way.
Okay. I think it's the effect of the woman around me. My name is Amadou Gueye. I'm from Senegal, from IPAR, and really happy to have this result around empowering women in agriculture. Like my flow, I just maybe start with a little bit story from how the woman was not employed in agriculture. I'm from the north of Senegal, where agriculture is the main activities. And if you see how the activities around it is a woman from man. If you see, when I was younger, you see woman maybe in a land, it seemed he did not have maybe a husband or haven't a man from there. I think the things start there. And just the question I ask myself and you, how this process not go alone for women, but how we can also implique men on this process to empowering women. Because I'm sometimes embracing when there's results so about how maybe women were seen about the society in the agriculture. But that question is if those men know really the impact that what they are doing on women. I think those research can go also to go for the men to show them really how the impact they have and how we can build a strategy because also the man is part of the problem. I think we need to involve them there and not to do like unsound science for how we can empower women between women. I think we need to learn this, and men also need to know really they are part of the problem, but also they will be part of the solution. Thank you.
Yes, let's just the time, just 1 minute, 1 to 2 minutes per person, please.
Should I can ask my
Yes.
question? No? Okay, thank you. I had 2 short questions for the 2 women in the middle. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting both of your names now. The first was, there was a quote that said, solar is for women. I was just wondering if you could maybe expand on that a little and the context. And the second was for yourself. You had shared about the experiences of women and like sexual assault in the marketplace and some of the menstruation as being a bias against their participation. And I'm just curious, when you were sharing those results with those with the men in that context, what their reaction was, and if there was any kind of, desire to address those issues. Thank you.
Yeah, I will take 2 more from this side, then we give a chance. Just, yeah.
Hello, my name is Joseph Flomot. I'm from Liberia. My question is going to Laure, who presented from Senegal. She mentioned promotion of solar energy for women. And she also talked about producing solar energy for women. And the question I want to ask is, how sustainable is this program if it's something that is being made for the farmers, for the women, instead of something that they are able to do for themselves? And you also emphasize on that particular woman who was standing by the photo of the solar that I saw, that she works more than other women and also more than other men. So what strategy are you developing so that other women will also be involved or have access to what she has? Thank you.
Okay. My name is Diana Steentoft. I'm the Secretary General of the World Blind Union. Wonderful words are being said here. It's really inspiring, especially the words about social inclusion, intersectionality, holistic approach, and not least the final intervention here, talking about women being many other things than women. Now, about 15% of the world population has a disability. Close to 300 million people have a visual impairment. And I'm just wondering if some of you would share with us your experiences with working with inclusion and accessibility within your projects, so between women themselves, because that's quite often also an issue. Thank you.
Okay, I'll give a chance about 5 minutes together to answer the questions.
Thank you for your questions and inputs. The woman who was saying that solar is for women, her name is Rokaya. She's been to university and she got married and decided that instead of being only at home woman, she would work on a farm because she was in a rural setting. And she first got solar energy through a project, but it was not good equipment. But she she sensed the potential of using energy. And when she was saying this sentence, she was in the middle of her field, and she was saying, you know, men, they have strength. They can carry on buckets of water. I cannot. It's just biology, it's physiology. And this solar power, I just push a button, there's no noise, and I am irrigating my field. I can go back home, cook, take care of my kids. This technology, you should promote this technology for women first. And this was quite illuminating to us, because we were like, okay, this is a technology is difficult for women. And she was telling us, no, 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 this is for women, and we should change the minds of people offering the solar programs. In terms of sustainability of programs targeting women, I have to say that in the area we are working on, most of the farmers are women. Most of the people working on farms are women. So there's obviously a need to target them specifically, but because they are an important number of the farmers of this region. And in terms of access, we've been working a lot with the financial institution, and we found out that whenever the local financial institution have programs for access to solar energy, most of the people having access to the financing programs are men. Even if they say it's a program for women, in reality there's no specific incentives for women. So this is the thing that we are trying to change, and we work on that with the Agency for Renewable Energy of Senegal and other financial partners to get fundings to be able for financial institutions to take these fundings and have specific incentives for women. And in terms of disabilities, we have not been working specifically on disabilities regarding this specific program. Kensha has. So, thank you.
Just quickly, I'll ask about this part of the 3 types of barriers, biases and behavior, is the one that more surprised people when we talk to them, both males and females. This part of sexual harassment or just harassment, and saying that's not for women, that's being normalized. So it's a surprise when we say it's a barrier, and then we have a large survey, so we have numbers, we have evidence. So here are the numbers. We're not making this up. And they open their eyes and they say, okay, I want to learn more. So it's been good, but we need to sensibilize more, because at least in our societies, that's kind of normalized. And for example, in Guatemala, about 60 or 70%, between 60 and 70% of women producers say that when they go to a market-oriented space, they hear this, go away, this is not for you, you shouldn't be here. So it's very not nice, but they still do it. So they're strong. So one of the things that we're seeing is the women who are having success in these processes in our region, it's different, every context is different, are stronger. And with empowerment indicators, we see that they have a higher level of these indicators, showing that they are not your average woman. So we need to understand why they have been able to do it and not the others, so we can have more women succeed in these value chains.
Okay. Can I go for the first question and the last question? Okay. Should I begin with the last question about inclusion of the Dalits, disabilities, and very marginalized women among the women? Like in our case in Nepal, we have, we have our constitutional mandate, constitutional instruction from 2015 very strongly for inclusion. It, gives many instructions, but as you said, it is not very easy to include all of them. But when we did the baseline survey for this project, we ensured that the leave no one behind approach, so that we start from those who really rely on forest because they don't have land or landless and very small landholder. But among them, our project design, we made it that about, mentioned about indigenous peoples, Dalits, land poor, landless, women with disabilities, and single and widowed women. Those are criteria we included. So from the very beginning, intersectionality approach was applied, and it was difficult. It's not that you don't get people, but it was difficult because are we really counted for that? Why they are asking us? We may not be benefiting, or we may be charged for some other things, because forest is something very legal. It is not like agriculture. It is not private land. Forest is government land, and it's community forest users group. We have community forest, that the community managed forest controlled by government, okay? So maybe we will be in trouble. We will fall in trouble. But so these kind of discourses was done, a lot of intersection from intersectionality approach and lens. It took long time for doing all this preparation. It took us at least 1.5 months, more than that. So I think if we have intention, if we be proactive, we must do, and we must do that. That is human rights of the disability people, human rights of the women who are more marginalized than others, single women. We have different kinds of women and some sex workers also. So who are not counted very, to be good women, we work like that. And it is really enjoyable. Then coming back to the first question, how do we not exclude men? That is really important because, we want family well-being. And in the family, women and children well-being, of course the man's well-being. So it is kind of not mathematical, answer. But what we did, when we started, then many women started saying that they are in daily wage job and their male go for daily wage job. Can we also, we include men in the debate together, discussions together, so that there should be better understanding. So when they demanded, it became very easy for us. So it was they were also involved, men, women. Where in our country, there are a lot of out migration of the men. It is kind of feminization situation. There, what we did, whoever has some dominating power in the family, maybe in-laws, some in-laws, women in-laws or male in-laws, who is very close to the participant. So we included them together in doing gender analysis from the very beginning. Not all activity profile and resource profile. It was very helpful, for internalization of the power relations, how it impacts their economy and so on, blah, blah, blah. So I think we go for involving men in all the discussion, but things difficult. We had supported construction of building, small building with local government, private parties all together, collaborative approach for keeping their technology machines where they, process the enterprises, like some plates and bowls like that from the leaves. I think Gyanu has some books like this, you can distribute later. So what happened? Then the committees were formed of women, and they also opened bank account. So it was men started in one place. Men started protesting. Why should we not go for that? Why should our women be in the bank? Why should they go? So this kind of things kept coming, but we facilitated some discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have come to the end of our session. Thank you for coming and listening. There have been critical and very important lessons that we have learned here. So if I could just summarize, when the keynote speaker was talking, actually, she started already saying that the participation of women on negotiations is increasing, but very slowly. So, and then that continued even at local level when we heard from Nepal that women are not participating, etc. So I think one of the lessons that we learned is that there are barriers, and the most important thing is to address those barriers if we want women to participate meaningfully. Participation is not just numbers, how many women, 50% men, 50% women. Participation is how women participate. Does it make sense? Is it active participation or not just passive participation in terms of numbers? The other issue that came out strongly is that of intersectionality, which challenge the notion that women are not homogeneous. There are women that are more empowered, and they take advantage of the gender opportunities for them to participate. So what we are learning here today, we need to look at who is the most vulnerable woman. And there are also men, there are women, there are youth, there are children that are also vulnerable, that we need to consider when we are targeting the most vulnerable groups that are impacted by climate change. And from my point of view, I just want to add one point, that patriarchy, always think of patriarchy, and context is very important. And locally, each local context is different. There are certain local contexts where patriarchy is not rigid, and there are certain contexts where patriarchy is quite rigid. So we need to think of that when we are having intervention with women. Thank you very much.